GrowCFO is where finance leaders grow together. Join thousands of like-minded professionals using GrowCFO to access the combined knowledge and experience of the finance leader community. You can join us today, growcfo.net.
Hello and welcome to the GrowCFO Show. I'm your host, Kevin Appleby, and I'm really pleased to have back with me head of our mentoring team, Catherine Clark. Catherine, it's a long time since we've recorded a podcast together.
It is, Kevin. Thank you for having me back. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
So am I. You're seeing something out there with the mentees and the CFOs that you're working with that's, I think, is a really interesting observation, Catherine. And we're loosely titling the podcast today, Leading with Connection. So, connection, what's that all about?
I really want us to talk today how finance leaders, CFOs, can really create impact and influence through relationships, and to just explore how connection, relationships with other people can actually drive leadership success in finance. That can be connection with their CEOs, their other sort of senior leadership team colleagues, their own teams, and also wider organizational stakeholders as well. But ultimately, I want finance leaders themselves to feel more seen, more valued, and influential in shaping strategy and performance.
Yeah, that's that connection bit, Catherine. I think when we were chatting earlier, we were highlighting the tendency these days to spend more time working remotely. So I've spoken to some CFOs on the podcast that have got a completely remote organization, others that have got a hybrid organization, but we've certainly moved away from that point that you're seeing people in the office every day and connecting with them that way. So how's that contributing to the issues you're seeing?
I would say I'm seeing a lot of finance leaders who are obviously technically performing exceptionally well, but they're really quite emotionally and relationally drained because they're feeling an increasing sense of disconnection within key relationships in that sort of remote setup. And there used to be a slightly more natural sort of connection when people were physically together in one space, maybe day in, day out. People came together in the office, or through that sort of physical connection, they really had very good relationships with their senior colleagues around them. And because people were connecting more naturally, maybe even just at the coffee station, there was ample time to discuss things that were happening on a daily basis, whether that be commercially or strategically. And it immediately involved the finance leader in that kind of conversation.
Yeah, I can see that. I remember those days. And I'm even thinking back at this point, Catherine, to my time in ICI, where we had really built into the culture were two things. First one was managing by walking about, and the second one was the open door policy. If the team lead, the manager, whoever it was, had a closed door, that meant they were busy in a meeting doing something extremely important. The rest of the time the door was open. That meant that anybody could walk in and have a chat.
Yeah. And of course, on this podcast, we're not trying to say that remote working is a bad thing. It's actually a very good thing. There's a lot of positives that have come out from the shift in that sort of hybrid or remote working environment. What I would like to encourage is more of a natural connection again between people. So trying to replicate what would have been a fully in-person environment into the remote environment. I'm seeing less effort, and I'm seeing this through clients I'm working with, put into the connections and the relationships and the conversations. And that really is having a profound effect on leadership, on happiness, but also on retention of finance leaders in organizations.
Is it retention of finance leaders, Catherine? Is it retention of the staff working for the finance leader as well?
Yes, it can be both. So we're not, although we're talking maybe about finance leaders and CFOs, this can work always round. So the CFO or finance leader also has to model these good behaviours to keep their own teams engaged and feeling connected and part of the organisation.
So that leads to a natural question, Catherine, that says, okay, you've got your diary that gets a stack of meetings in it. You do the meetings. And you connect to an extent with the people that are in the meetings, but it's a conversation that more often than not model around agenda. you've presumably got to try and do a lot more than that to make this work properly.
Yes, because not really allowing space anymore so much for these sort of spontaneous sort of human moments or human connection. And it's those moments which actually create the emotional connection and the emotional impact. So the more structure we put into things, as you say, the more there's an agenda. It's like having a set reason for meeting up rather than having a fluid conversation and allowing a flow to happen and then seeing where that conversation leads. And if I'm honest, I'm hearing too much that really some very important connections or conversations are happening in very short blocks of time, or they're just not happening because they're online. People feel they can cancel them very, very easily or quickly, as if it isn't as important as something else that's going on in their sort of day-to-day lives.
Yeah, and that's frustrating me enormously, personally. And I've had podcast recordings cancel 5 minutes before we're due to record. Had meetings with tech partners cancel 5 minutes before we were supposed to hold them. Things like that seem to happen all of the time. But
yeah, so people are feeling
cost of disconnection.
Yeah, the cost of disconnection. And it's so important because I want to make the connection in our conversation between if people feel connected, they will deliver more value for your organization. So if you're thinking about certain outcomes, they will help you get to that point. So it's definitely like a leadership skill to connect and to recognize that human beings around you are an asset to your organization. And when we're talking from a financial point of view, that connection is the bridge between numbers and meaning. So yes, there is definitely a cost of disconnection. And let me maybe share some thoughts on that and what some finance leaders and CFOs have been sharing with me actually over recent times. And please feel free if there's any thoughts you have on it as well. But I've actually had, and this is on numerous occasions now, this is not one or two, it's numerous connections in meetings that I've had. Many CFOs are saying, I'm only hearing about key decisions after they have been made, or I used to be in the room, but now I hear about something through sort of a later email communication, or probably even worse, through like a WhatsApp conversation. You've got people saying they're just being kept out of day-to-day decision making. So when we describe an environment where people were physically together, you had to include people in the conversation. Now it's very easy to exclude, probably not intentionally, probably not deliberately, but people are being excluded because it's harder to get people together.
Yeah, I definitely get that. I can see the situation where leader says, okay, there's a particular person I've got to talk to about this and sound things out, and does that in a way that is one-to-one because everybody's remote, difficult to get people together, and then goes to others in the team and says, oh, we've decided that.
That's right. That's right. And again, you really have to think about how does that person on the receiving end feel? Not only do they feel disconnected, they sometimes feel, well, I'm just not part of it anymore. And one of the most important things is not feeling like they belong fully to important things that are happening in the organization. And if we look at why people leave an organization, it often is because it's not that they don't love their job. They often don't leave for the job, but they leave because there is a sense of not belonging.
Yes. And I think back to a point in my career, it was nothing to do with being remote or anything like that, but that was the point that I stepped out of PwC. And it wasn't because I didn't like the work I was doing. It was one or two little bits of politics around a sense of belonging. No?
It's that whole sort of psychological safety of you want to feel like you belong to an environment and you're valued and you're heard and you're seen. All of those lovely things that really make you feel great. And of course, we know this, we've talked about it before. If you feel great, you will deliver like even more value. You'll deliver at your best with passion and enthusiasm and all of those good things. And, you know, finance leaders...
People leave because they want to go back to that place where they can deliver at their best.
and, feel like they are being part of the conversation or being part of, particularly with things that have a financial element to them, they're part of the conversation early on, so they can share potentially what the financial implications of a decision may be. Because finance leaders really, their best value is in just guiding and shaping and influencing decisions. More of the right decisions have a good return for the organization.
Yeah, because once you're in that position, it's not about crunching the numbers anymore. It's all about influencing people and directing people into the right, or directing is the wrong word, but it's cajoling and moving and shifting opinion and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what we're saying is connection isn't just a nice to have, or, when I feel like it, or when I think I've got time to do it. It is a performance enabler, and it is a sort of value creator. And I just think, given all the stories I've been hearing over a long period of time, is this needs to be like at the forefront of leadership.
Yeah. So we started touching a little while ago, Catherine, on how to solve this, but how do we actually go and rethink connection to make it work?
Yeah, I've got some thoughts on this that I'd like to share, and they're in no particular order, but I just hope they just help people think in a way, really. That's the sort of aim of this section. I think one is, and I will start with this, is that connection is mutual. So we're not talking from any one side here. It's really a case of don't wait for others to reach out. Although we'd sort of maybe hope in a sort of hierarchy sort of scenario that the more senior reaches out to the team below, doesn't have to be that way round. So recognize that you yourself, and let's say we're talking to CFOs and finance leaders here, you can make the first move. And if you don't feel like the relationship or connection with your CEO, for example, or with other senior leadership team members is great or good enough, then make the first move. So get out there, book a coffee if you can do, if you're physically close enough, or send a message, start the conversation with people. Because actually, when you take ownership of that connection and don't just sit there waiting for it to happen, then you are saying quite powerfully, I want to collaborate and I value this relationship. So let's make it work. And hopefully you stepping out means they come back to you and they start to also change their behavior in the connection as well.
I'm minded actually at this point of something that I talk about in a future CFO program. Module 9, your first 100 days as CFO. And one of the things that I encourage people to start doing very early on is to draw a stakeholder map. And literally, there are two axes on my stakeholder map. The vertical axis is how much influence does this person have? How important are they? And the bottom axis is how good is my relationship with this person? And start plotting as you've taken on your new CFO role, start putting people on there and see where the relationship is and consciously try to move all of those relationships to the right.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Those early days particularly are about connecting to the people you need to connect with around you and investing the time early to do that. And I think, by the way, it connects to one of the points I was going to share, which is thinking about what is it they need from you, not what you can necessarily bring to them, but how can you understand them better? So really do think about what they need. So when you're engaging in those conversations, whether it's a new role or just day in, day out, just really focus on what they need and make the connection that way. Or what would make the CEO or someone else more confident in a partnership between you two? So what can actually make a difference to feeling seen and trusted more? So it really is it's not about us. It's not about explaining ourselves better. It's about understanding others more deeply.
Yeah, absolutely. And you and I were having a chat before we started recording, and we said we weren't going to mention COVID and how that started a lot of this. But I was reminded that actually my own personal remote working started a long time before then. And I can think, why did this always work? It was because the people that were working together, we knew each other very well. We had that connection. It didn't matter that we were working remotely because we knew what made each other tick. We knew what each other were good at and what possibly needed help with. And we came together face to face often enough for it to all work together nicely. And I do think that we've possibly got to that extreme in certain cases where we're totally remote and we're not connecting in those occasions where it's not absolutely necessary. It's kind of, how do you get to know the person? That's a difficult one.
And I think it is time together. So I think I agree with you. And I think it's about replicating some of the way we created relationships in the past and making sure that's still happening, even if people are remote. We've got to make the time for it, because otherwise there's a lot of misunderstanding. One of the examples I was going to share was that, and again, I've had CFOs, finance leaders raising it to me time and time again. WhatsApp has become a form of communication. I have a personal view, and I know a lot of people share my view, so it isn't just my view, that WhatsApp is a bit more of a personal tool, not a business tool, because there are many business tools to be using first and foremost. But WhatsApp's being used as a way of communicating in a very short way, short and quick. And it's quite intrusive. In fact, someone shared with him this morning, it's quite intrusive because it comes into your personal space, whether that's in working hours or not. But the tone of them can be really quite easily misunderstood.
Absolutely misunderstood. I've always had the problem with email as well, that people answer with very, very short, sharp replies, which can be taken out of context far too easily.
Yes. And you've only got to be feeling tired or a bit more sensitive or just, again, not understanding the person fully because you've not got the relationship in place. And it can really make the recipient feel really quite unhappy. So we've really got to be thinking about, again, how is something being received, or what impact is that having on their motivation, on their way of feeling that sort of time. I want to stress to anyone listening that we should ideally assume a positive intent. So therefore, we can misunderstand things. So therefore, with a positive intent, we're actually thinking to ourselves in our own minds, okay, well, maybe that person's busy and therefore it's not meant to be hostile. It's not meant to be in that sort of tone. And it can actually change how we feel. Builds more sort of empathy and curiosity as to what is really going on here, as opposed to taking it personally. But I think for anyone communicating digitally, please really think about the tone in which it's being written, because it can have a detrimental impact on the recipient if they don't understand the relationship fully, or that relationship hasn't got to, because someone was sharing me this morning that once they'd built a long-term, trustworthy, open relationship with their boss, they didn't mind that. They did mind it with a new CEO in place who hadn't actually spent the time getting to know them well.
Exactly. Yeah. So, Catherine, in terms of getting to know people well, how do we actually do it? I'm still struggling with this a little bit because, okay, I'll go into a different position that says, back in a consulting life, PwC, you'd put on a project and you'd probably get put on a project. You might know a couple of people there, but chances are you didn't know half the team. You'd never met them before. One of the things that we were always challenged to do was to get to know each other damn quickly so we could be a high-performing team. And the way that was more often than not done was over a beer in the pub, because it's that sort of conversation, not the sort of conversation you have around the meeting table, that gets you to know each other and work out how people tick. Okay, so if we're all working hybrid or working remotely, I'm still struggling to think for good ideas of actually how to make that work. So once every 6 months get together isn't going to do it.
No, it's not. It's got to be more regular. But I think it has to start with a belief on all sides, by the way. I'm just going to say that connection has value to it. It has to start with a belief that the people you've got around you are an asset to the organization. It's quite a simple belief system, but you have to believe and recognize that connection is extremely important to how people feel and therefore how they perform in a role. So that may look different to each person or connection, but it's exactly what you're saying. It is about a coffee or a lunch or a few days together in a sort of strategic sort of away day kind of scenario. And I certainly agree with what you shared earlier, way more at the beginning to really embed that relationship and establish it early on and then reconnect on a regular basis.
If you know the people that you work with.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure you had the same, but I did a lot of traveling in my role as CFO. And okay, there was sometimes a reason for traveling, but actually the main reason was connection. The main reason was about meeting in person the people that were working for me or I was working with. And the relationship after that was incredibly positively different. Until you see it, you can't quite put your finger on why, but there is a huge difference. It's like when I meet mentoring clients in person. It works really well remotely. Then I'll meet someone in person. There's just a different kind of energy connection.
Yeah, there is, absolutely. And you need that energy connection. I'm going back years and years ago to my time in ICI again. And we were working in the European plastics business. So we had a big manufacturing site in the UK, big manufacturing site in Holland. Well, as the business accountant, great. I was half a mile away from the plant in the head office, saw the works accountant and his team all of the time. I didn't do that, didn't have the same with the folks in Holland. But with one of the business units, we developed a superb relationship with Holland because we'd take the central team would go out there once a quarter or they'd come to us. And we got into a culture when we did that of, well, whoever's the host has to organize a fantastic team night out. And we got into the culture of the Dutch were trying to outdo on the next visit what the Brits had done. And it was fun. We did some great things and we really got to know each other, even though most of the time we were working completely remotely. And this is 30 years ago, Catherine, when we didn't have Zoom and things like that. Literally, if you wanted to talk to them, it was send an email or pick up a telephone.
Yeah, but the really influence again comes from trust, and it comes from, let's be honest, people sort of liking you in a way or understanding you. So you must build that to have any kind of foundation for influence. And when I think about one of the key challenges that finance leaders face is, well, how can I be more influential? I'm not influential enough, that kind of thing. Well, it all stems from the relationships and the rapport.
Exactly.
And that rapport, let's be completely honest, of course you can build it remotely with effort and time, but it's a lot quicker in person. And also I think the conversation goes deeper because you start to quite quickly get into the bigger picture understanding of things. You understand why certain things matter to certain people, like where their heads are at, where their focus is. You really start to understand the why behind the scenes. And I think we touched on in a conversation before we got together today, but when you've built that sort of trust, by the way, there's a lot of clarity in what you're doing and the direction of travel and how you're supporting an organization, people can then feel empowered. But if I'm honest with you, I'm seeing a combination of lack of connection and lack of clarity, which is a really bad combination. And it really isn't allow people to perform at their best.
Exactly. Yes. I think the trust and the empowerment are key. If you're going to let somebody work remotely and get on with stuff, then you've got to absolutely empower them and absolutely trust what they're doing. It is key.
Yeah. And, it sort of leads on to recognition is connection. Something I feel like anyone could go and do like tomorrow is keep saying thank you to people. It sounds really small. It's really easy to do, but it has a huge impact on how people feel. And I think a lot of what I hear is people are busy. People around them are busy. That seems to be what life is about. A huge amount of busyness. But if you actually stop and acknowledge each other and say thank you. And what you're really saying by saying thank you is, I see you and I appreciate you. And those two things, seeing and appreciating, again, build belonging. We're back to that sense of belonging again, which is so incredibly important. And again, that appreciation will fuel motivation. It reduces stress in the workplace. One of the major causes of stress in the workplace, which the implications of that are huge, again, is a lack of recognition and gratitude for people. and their contribution and value in the organization. So it's that one for me is probably one of the simplest but most important things.
You're absolutely right there, Catherine. And I think if somebody's taken time to do stuff and thinks they've done a good job, and then if all they hear back is perhaps a niggly bit of criticism or some small aspect of it that's not right, they will get a feeling that they're not good enough, not working in the right way. That's where the stress is going to come from. But no product that anybody produces is ever going to be 100% right. Okay, there's always going to be room for a debate around some aspect of it. But if you've started by the thank you very much, great job, super report, and you've put it in context before that, I think that's hugely important.
Yeah, and it's because our minds can get very busy ourselves with negativity or negative thinking, and we really want to avoid putting that kind of negativity into others in any way, because it will consume them. And guess what? If our minds are full of more negative thinking, or I am not appreciated, I'm not seen, or maybe I'm not good enough, then we're not putting our minds to full use on things that create true value. And I also want people to think about that whole busyness can really kill empathy. And so to have that real connection, you've really got to very consciously slow down and give people time. So that real sort of active listening where you choose to sit with someone with no agenda, but you just listen, because that genuine presence, it may only be 5 minutes or it could be much longer, but that will really fuel engagement and the relationship.
I think having a catch-up call, could be one-on-one, it could be a call, but it's a catch-up call with actually no agenda is something that's very powerful.
It's almost about giving that time to people and then, okay, we've talked before, not everyone is in the office every day now. That's absolutely fine. Huge benefits to that. But you've still got to be emotionally available. So even though you're not physically present, you must be emotionally available. And therefore, that's exactly plays to your point around having a meeting with no agenda. We're all showing up. We're all seeing how each other are genuinely, not just how are you? I'm fine. Thank you very much. But listening in to exactly where people are at. And just as a leader, just really showing up with warmth and authenticity, because even if it's on a screen, that energy can still come through and build trust. But you've got to really consciously show up in that way.
There's another place we're quite touched on where connection, I think, is really important. And I think about times where you've got relatively junior people working directly for you. Their tendency will be to try and look good, to try and get on with stuff, and probably not come along and ask the question of you when they really should. Now, in the office situation, I would tend to overcome that by, you just have an eye on them. And you'd almost notice when they were struggling just from body language and things like that. Or you might, if you weren't even noticing that, there might be an occasional, as you walk into the coffee machine, how's things going? Now, that doesn't happen when you've got that junior member on a remote team. I remember, actually, it was COVID. We hit this problem first off, doing a big consulting project, and we had one very junior member of the team. And we really had to rethink, how do we make sure that she feels comfortable? She's contributing properly, that everything we're asking her to do is clear. She knows how to do it. Because this is the sort of thing we would have done by being across the desk from her, so we could have that conversation and we could keep checking all the way through that. That's one for me that I personally haven't solved because I haven't been back in that situation again. I've been working pretty much since then with experienced and competent people, not what you would classify as in a trainee role.
I agree with you. I think a lot of it was you could pick it up through the body language. It's rarely about the words that are said. It is about picking it up through the body language. You could still replicate that now on screen. But again, we're sort of repeating the same points, but you've got to show up with the time to listen and to, again, emotionally connect to their body language, even on the screen, and be interested in them as a person. I think that's the crux of it. You've got to have the time to be interested in people.
means slowing down.
It does mean slowing down. Yeah. And I know there's lots of pressures. I'm realistic. I work with people every day. So I'm well aware of the real pressures and the realism of scenarios. But when you think about, although we can't calculate it financially, if someone is operating below par because they feel disconnected or because they feel isolated in some way or not heard or not seen or not valued, what's possible if that all shifts? That's how I look at it. You may not be able to put a financial number to it, but I could 100% say there will be value created if you turn all of those around.
Absolutely.
Because productivity has value attached to it, or focus, focusing on what's truly important in an organization, understanding what the board or a CEO need from you. That's where the value is.
Yes. And I come back to a coaching formula, Catherine. Performance equals potential minus interference. Your job as manager is to remove the interference. And I think you've got to really connect to understand what that interference is.
Absolutely. Yes. Work out what that noise is. And often that noise comes from how we're feeling emotionally. So we cannot ignore the emotional side of this.
That noise might be, a personal problem going on at home. It's personal. Things like that people do not bring up in meetings, but they might have brought up in the conversation around the coffee machine. And you're fully aware of it that way. You've got to find a new way of tapping into what's going on in people's lives because it's important.
And I have truly seen people leaving organizations at a very senior finance level. That connection is not in place and in place fully. And it's not a relationship that they are satisfied by. It doesn't feed them anymore. It doesn't feed them to stay loyal and connected. So, I'm back to what you're saying really, is what is possible if everyone just reaches out a little bit more and recognizes people.
It's not necessarily, we've talked a lot about remote and hybrid, but Catherine, this applies in the office as well. And I'm going way, way back in time to the beginning of my career, qualifying in BDO. And we had 3 audit managers in our office. They were all great people to work for, and they were all very different. But there was one who, as a man manager, stood out to me. Sorry, person manager, get politically correct, Kevin. But Walter, if you're on Walter's team, and there was a saying that Walter knew what his team ate for breakfast.
I have worked for different organizations, many, and I have seen some amazing examples of real connection. And I cannot explain just how loyal people are in that kind. I mean, they would go above and beyond when that relationship works.
They would, exactly.
I've seen the counter to that where I couldn't have got out. I wanted to get out quickly because it was suffocating me, actually. It was suffocating me. It was suffocating the team and our ability to really thrive because I felt dreadful, actually, without the right relationship in place. So I've had also personal experiences sort of both ways round, and I know what I would choose.
Yes, definitely. The thing that keeps people engaged is definitely, it's the culture of the organization. It's the way you work, and culture is entirely about how do you interact with each other.
And do you feel like you belong?
Do you belong? And it's about the set of values in the organization and feeling as though they're your values.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So I think connection is both emotional and strategic. So choose the angle you want, but it's both. It's emotional and strategic. And I think I love when I'm mentoring to think about how can people thrive in their roles, really reach what's possible for them, their potential, all of that good things. But people are the source of performance. So we need to look after them. We need to see them as an asset and to make everyone, it doesn't matter which connection it is, but really feel truly seen and valued. Then I would say, and just start with a few things, reach out, say thank you, really share a piece of context or why behind something, make people feel included, and then see what shifts.
Yes. And there's a little bit in there about understanding some of your own strengths and weaknesses. Now, one of my strengths, coming out of Strengths Finder, is achiever. But what does achiever mean? It means I've kind of got to have this list. Load of tick, bang, 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 bang. Yes, I've ticked them all off. Oh, I've done this one. What's the next one? Get on with it. While that is a tremendous strength, there's a flip side to that. And if that's your strength as well, I think a lot of finance people, a lot of leaders come out of that place. The flip side is that you're too busy thinking, oh, great, done that, get on with the next one, that you actually forget to say thank you. You forget the recognition bit. If that strength is your strength, think about the flip side of it.
And also, it is a strength, but it can make you look unavailable to others, which, without realizing it, is putting up a bit of a barrier to other people building more of a relationship with you. Because if you're saying, I'm busy, I'm busy, I'm busy, you're not letting anyone in.
Exactly.
As everything I share, I think there's an awful lot of self-awareness in this space to think.
Absolutely. That thought was just going through my mind. And to be honest, probably the people with the biggest problem in this area are the people that are least aware that they've got the problem. How do you sort that one out? I'd go ask your team.
Yeah. And if it's not a natural strength, if relationship building is not a natural strength of yours, it is something that really needs to be more consciously worked on because of the benefits that it has.
Yeah, absolutely. Catherine, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation, as indeed are all conversations that I have with you on.
I agree. Thank you, Kevin.
Hugely for bringing this one up today.
It came to me yesterday as a real, I must share this, really has been it's come up a lot recently. So I feel it's very timely and I hope helps a lot of people think in a different way.
Yeah. So Catherine, thank you very much for being this week's guest on the GrowCFO Show.
Thank you very much, Kevin.